so good morning. It's a little humid and not much wind blowing on this Friday morning here. And my mosquito repellent hasn't quite heated up, so I'm probably going to see a few mosquitoes through here. And my nose thing is still on because when I take it off, my migraine comes back like a vengeance. So this morning I came across one of my fellow Substack writers, Bob Holmes, and he brought up something that I had kind of been feeling for a long time, but I didn't feel quite comfortable naming it. It's this idea of kind of being a misfit. So when you have a religious order, a religious congregation, one thing that does kind of hold it together is these kind of set of principles and maybe rituals that give it some structure so that there isn't sort of any flying away. And obviously that's how you have so many different denominations of Christianity, because when you begin to interpret things a little differently, sometimes those practices no longer are in accord with what you're feeling inside. So in that regard, it's really good to kind of keep the community together, to have people of different ideologies come together in agreement with the practices. And again, so you might not always agree, and that's one thing about Catholics. You have very conservative Catholics, you have very liberal Catholics, but we all kind of come together with that one creed. But Bob Holmes was saying that with the mystic tradition and all these writers who had kind of written about their experience, it too was held by their common faith, but then there was sort of these open rooms that they would go into. So like Julian of Norwich and Hadovich and like I said, I just have those two in my head, and certainly Saint Teresa of Avila, and even the desert fathers and mothers. They kind of realized that the city life, the worldly life, didn't allow them to really cultivate this contemplative tradition. And they still had those essential principles, but they just didn't feel like they fit in so much. And I know Thomas Merton too felt very, very comfortable in solitude, but he also recognized the need to communicate and bridge those gaps that can often occur. But for myself, I've found very few people who kind of have this sort of open sense of religiosity that I do. And that's why I'm very grateful for, this tradition of of listening to people from other religious traditions to kind of look for that commonality. But I want to return to this idea of feeling like a misfit, and sometimes I've, in some of my religious gatherings, I would hear some of the things that people would say, and I would say silent, thinking, I don't know if I really agree with that yet, because maybe this person holds a certain amount of power. I would remain silent. And then, and this has to do with group dynamics, and then everyone else assumes that this is the popular opinion. But then they call it the spiral of silence. But then what happens is you kind of go into this spiral where you continue to remain silent, and it makes you feel isolated, because what you're believing is different, and because you don't feel confident enough, you will stay silent. You still want to fit in. You still want to belong to a community, but you feel that you can't really speak your mind. And so we have a choice. So we can and sort of question what we believe, and kind of take it in prayer and go back to our precepts, our principles, and say, is this out of line? So that's a lot of self-reflection. And sometimes what happens is that we will not have enough confidence in what we believe, so we pretend to believe, and we have this false sense of belief just to fit in. And this not only happens in religious circles, but it happens in social circles. So this desire to fit in, this desire for belonging and community, just has this disconnect because we really don't agree. So, but then on the other hand, we can step away and agree, say, this isn't where I am. And again, so it makes you feel like this misfit. It's a very scary place to be, because you feel like your identity has been completely deconstructed. And I know that Joshua Harris went through this. He was highly regarded in the Christian evangelical movement, and he began to question. And so for a while he tried to pretend that he didn't believe in this, and then he was spewing out very hateful things. And then he finally just kind of said, I can't lie to my heart anymore. And so he actually walked away from this very this great reputation in his community. And he actually just kind of took a lot of time, and he actually didn't even believe in God anymore. So it basically just uprooted him completely. And so I watched him in this transformation, and now he is coming back into a belief in God, but he's much more open. So it took a lot of courage for him to be this misfit. And so if you are kind of feeling that you don't belong, that you feel like you're a misfit, just know that you are in a bigger community than you might know. Now, of course, I will mention that some people will prey upon these misfits and use very attractive language to draw these vulnerable people in, and that's how we have cults, and we basically create false idols out of that. But just know that, just like those desert fathers and mothers and all the fellow mystics and contemplatives who've lived before us, they too have felt sort of out of sorts. They didn't feel like they fit in these nice, neat boxes. They might, they certainly did practice some of the rituals of the church, but they also welcomed these different, sorry, this mosquito is kind of saying, oh, she might be a tasty breakfast. So they were continually, sorry, I hate mosquitoes. They were continually finding new names of God. They were continually finding new characteristics. And so they weren't putting God in a box. They were recognizing that God is everywhere. And so for our minds to contain him in this one practice wasn't enough. And they were opening themselves to this all-loving God, this all-embracing God, and embracing their creative selves, and embracing their outpouring of devotion, this bhakti yoga, this perhaps these were embodied practices, breath practices. They were specific gestures that drew them closer to who God is deep in, and it would bubble up inside of them. So again, if you feel that you don't fit in, you don't kind of check all those boxes, just know that doesn't necessarily mean that you're bad, and that you shouldn't, you shouldn't fear. Instead, just welcome where God might be leading you, keeping your eyes open, and know that you aren't alone in how you feel, and know that God has a unique expression in you, that God is so desperate for you to speak. So have a lovely Friday or Saturday, or whenever you're watching this, and I'm going to go inside and get away from these mosquitoes.